My name is Dr. Ben David and I died of a heart attack at 58 while doing research on the Sea of Galilee. For 23 minutes, I was gone. My life wasn't what you would call spiritual. I'm a scientist, a limnologist to be exact. That's a fancy word for someone who studies freshwater lakes and rivers. For 30 years, the Sea of Galilee, the Kinet as we call it, was my office. It was my life's work. My world was made of numbers, water samples, algae bloom reports, and sonar readings. I could tell you the oxygen saturation at 50 feet deep, but I couldn't tell you much about God. I was born in Haifa. I'm a Jew, of course. I respect our traditions, our history, but my faith was in data, in things I could measure, test, and prove. My wife, Leah, she was the spiritual one in our home. She would light the Shabbat candles and I would admire the flame thinking about the physics of combustion. She would pray for our daughter Maya who was studying abroad, and I would just send Maya money thinking that was the more practical help. I loved my family more than anything on this earth. The story of Avi Ben David begins on the still waters of the Sea of Galilee, where the morning light kissed the surface of the lake like a sheet of glass. He was a man of science, a limnologist, who had spent 3 decades studying the secret rhythms of the water. His world was built on numbers and reports, measurements and equations. To him, faith belonged to others. His wife Leah with her candles, her prayers whispered for their daughter Maya, her reverent gestures. Avi admired the flames, but only for the physics of their combustion. His faith was in data, in what could be tested, weighed, and proven. God was an idea, distant and historical, never personal. That morning felt no different from 1,000 others. Avi leaned over the edge of his boat, the water strider, lowering a vial into the shimmering depths. His hands moved with the casual confidence of habit, his mind already considering the data he would record, the decline in salinity, the rise in algae. The breeze was gentle, brushing his face like the hand of an old friend. But beneath that calm, something unseen was already stirring. It began as pressure in his chest, not a sharp stab, but a crushing weight, as though the whole lake had chosen that moment to rest upon him. He clutched at his chest, fingers fumbling for the radio, his scientist's mind dissecting the symptoms: stroke, heart attack, oxygen deprivation. His hand shook, the vial slipped into the water, vanishing like a lost fragment of his life's work. He tried to breathe, but every breath was strangled. His vision blurred, his strength drained, and the boat seemed to rock not from the waves, but from the collapsing rhythm of his body. Then suddenly, everything stopped. No pain, no pressure, no frantic calculations. The bright sun dissolved into a quiet darkness, a gentle, soft void that wrapped around him like a warm blanket. He was aware but untethered, detached from the weight of his failing body. He looked down and saw himself slumped over the side of the boat, fingers still outstretched toward the radio. His face, pale and drained, no longer carried the life it once did. Yet Avi was not afraid. There was no panic, only a strange peace, like watching a scene from someone else's life projected on a screen. From above, he saw another boat in the distance turning toward him. Men shouted, pointing, one raising a phone to call for help. But the urgency belonged to them, not to him. For Avi, the world of data, duty, and deadlines was already fading into memory. The worries of his research, the weight of responsibility, the unspoken fears he had carried for years, all of it fell away. He was floating in a darkness that was not empty but waiting, alive with presence. The stillness around him carried a soundless rhythm, like the heartbeat of eternity. It was as though creation itself had paused to breathe. Avi realized he had stepped into something beyond science, beyond matter, beyond all that he had trusted. His life of observation and skepticism had ended at the edge of the lake, and now he was drifting into a reality no microscope could capture. A warmth began to grow in that darkness, faint at first, like a small flame on the horizon of his soul. It pulsed with life, ancient yet new, drawing him closer. It was not a light for the eyes, but a light for the soul, felt more than seen. It grew brighter, filling the void with a presence that knew him, that held him, that drew him forward. And Avi, the scientist who had trusted only what he could measure, felt his spirit leaning into the immeasurable, carried by something he had never believed possible. The man who had spent his life studying the waters of Galilee was now carried by a tide not of earth, but of eternity. For 23 minutes, the clock of the world would mark him as gone. But in that span of silence, Avi was being prepared to encounter the truth he had avoided all his life. The Sea of Galilee had been his office, his sanctuary of numbers. Now it had become the threshold of heaven. Avi drifted in that gentle darkness, untethered from his body, but strangely more alive than ever before. His first thought was not fear, but curiosity. The same curiosity that had driven him to peer into microscopes and dissect the mysteries of freshwater lakes. He had studied countless samples under glass, but now he himself was the specimen, suspended in a reality that defied the laws of nature. Below him, the scene on the boat played out like a slow, distant film. He saw his body sprawled over the side, lifeless, the hand that had once collected water now limp. The radio hung just beyond his reach. The fishermen in the distance were closing in, their shouts slicing across the still water, but to Avi, their urgency felt irrelevant. He was no longer tied to the desperate pounding of his heart or the panic of survival. What gripped him now was not dread, but wonder. The darkness surrounding him was not the absence of light. It was a living presence. It breathed around him like velvet air, soft and tender, carrying neither cold nor heat, only balance. Avi marveled at the peace. It was nothing like the clinical silence of a laboratory. This was a silence alive with meaning, like standing on the threshold of a great revelation. He began to sense warmth, subtle at first, pulsing faintly in the middle of the stillness. The warmth grew stronger, seeping into him, not as a temperature but as recognition, as though something or someone was drawing closer. He felt a pull in his being, a gentle current urging him forward, as if he were drifting into the embrace of a truth he had long resisted. Avi thought of Leah, of Maya, of their laughter at the dinner table, of Leah's quiet prayers at candlelight. He had brushed them off as rituals, sentimental gestures. But here, in this vast calm, he realized he was entering the very reality she had been reaching toward with every whispered prayer. He understood in a flash that faith was not a myth, not a crutch for the weak. Faith was substance. Faith was here. The presence grew brighter. It was not a sudden burst, but a steady expansion, like dawn gently overtaking night. It pressed into the edges of the darkness until the void itself seemed to melt away. The warmth seeped deeper into Avi's soul, filling places he hadn't known were empty. And with it came the awareness that he was being seen, not observed as he had observed water samples, but truly known, as though every moment of his life had been etched into this light. The calm deepened. Avi felt weightless, not only in body but in spirit. The burdens he had carried, doubts, regrets, silent disappointments, were dissolving. He tried to analyze it as he always did, to assign words and categories, but the scientist in him was powerless here. What was happening exceeded every hypothesis, every boundary of reason. This was not theory, this was truth. His mind flickered back to his boyhood in Haifa, to the nights he had been afraid of the dark, hiding beneath the covers. He remembered the teenage years of rebellion, the heartbreaks he had buried, the mistakes he had never confessed. He thought of the arguments he had dismissed with Leah, the distance he sometimes felt from Maya, the weight of being too consumed by work to be present. All of it was here, not condemning him, but simply known. The warmth intensified, and Avi realized he was being drawn into something far greater than self-reflection. He was being invited into presence, into relationship. And for the first time in his life, Avi felt no need to explain himself, no urge to justify his doubts or defend his choices. The presence did not demand explanation. It only offered peace. The edges of the darkness glowed now, infused with light that was not like the sun or any earthly flame. It was light that carried awareness, that touched him deeper than eyes ever could. Avi sensed that the next moment would reveal what he had denied all his life. He was standing at the border between knowledge and truth, between the data he had lived by and the eternal reality he could no longer ignore. As the warmth solidified into brilliance, Avi realized this was not some abstract force. It was someone. The darkness had been but the veil before the revelation. And as that veil began to tear open, Avi braced himself, not with fear, but with awe. He was about to meet the one who had been waiting for him all along. The light does not arrive like a siren or a storm. It settles, the way dawn settles over a hill, quiet first, then everywhere. You sense it before you see anything, the way you sense a loved one enter a room behind you. Warmth folds around you, not heat, not brightness, but the kind of presence that makes every old question loosen its grip. You breathe, one gentle breath, and even the breath feels borrowed from a kindness older than your body. He stands within the light, as if the light were his native language. No paint, no frame, no memory could have prepared you for how real he is. There is a simple robe, yes, but it is the way existence gathers around him that arrests you. You have studied clarity in water your whole life. You know the exact point where a beam splits and scatters under a surface. But this clarity is not passive. It notices you. It meets you. In one quiet instant, you understand that the most accurate word you ever used, pure, belonged to him first. Avi does not step forward. the light steps into him. It fills the perimeter of his life as if every room, every hallway, every childhood corner were suddenly lit from within. Eyes hold him, those eyes. They do not search like a doctor's lamp or pierce like an interrogation. They read. They read the boy who feared the dark and learned to fold the fear into jokes. They read the teenager who clenched his jaw after the first heartbreak and promised never to be caught unguarded again. They read the adult who, with careful hands and sterile tools, collected data because data could not betray him. Your shoulders drop. You didn't know you were carrying that much. To be known without being pressed against the wall of your mistakes. This is what mercy feels like. It has texture. It is soft without being weak, strong without being cold. The presence moves across the years and does not step on anything fragile. You feel a gentle pause, as if heaven itself is honoring your story, even the parts you wish were not yours. There is no courtroom here, no bench to approach, no exhibit to defend. Just love, ancient and immediate, like a river that has been flowing below the city for centuries and suddenly rises through every street, washing them clean. Avi realizes he is not being sized up. He is being welcomed. The mind that knew the metabolism of fish and the stratification of freshwater layers goes quiet for once, not from confusion, but from relief. Knowledge, at its best, taught him to listen. Here, listening becomes worship. A soft understanding passes between them, more accurate than words could ever be. The light communicates without sound. I know you. I have always known you. Avi knows what the name is without syllables. He knows who he is meeting without an introduction. Leah's Shabbat candles, Maya's small prayers during tests, the verses he overheard but never kept. All of them now glow like breadcrumbs in a night he once thought was empty. The teacher of Nazareth, the healer by this very lake, the one his people debated and some adored and some rejected. He is not a figure from a page. He is life itself, and he is here. Avi expects to flinch under the inventory of his failures. Instead, he feels his life received like a gift, wrapped poorly, perhaps, but still received with a smile that does not humiliate. That smile says something his mind converts into understanding. You are not your worst day. He senses that every judged thing in him has reached the end of its sentence. The relief is so great, he almost laughs. You feel it with him, a quiet laughter of the soul that sounds like spring water somewhere near. His attention expands, and the lake appears beside them, not a place now, but a revelation. The Sea of Galilee as it was meant to be shines under a sky without edges. The water is lucid from surface to floor, each stone articulate, each strand of weed breathing faith. It is a perfection not of laboratory numbers, but of intent. Everything hums with yes. As a limnologist, he once taught that pure water transmits light better when particulates are minimal. Here, purity does more than transmit. It originates. The lake is not reflecting glory, it is participating in it. Avi recognizes a secret in the way the light moves under the surface. This is how a heart is supposed to carry love, through and through, with no pockets of shadow for resentment to nest in. He thinks of Leah's steady tenderness. He thinks of how often he treated her devotion as sweet, but optional. He thinks of Maya's calls he missed for fieldwork he could have rescheduled. Awareness does not stab him, it invites him. That is the difference here. Conviction comes as an open door, not a slammed one. You lean closer with him, listening to the silence that is not empty. It has weight, like a hand resting lightly on your shoulder. It says, stay, see, let this be true. You do not need to perform. You do not need to assemble arguments. The one before Avi requires no defense, offers no threat, and yet everything petty in you feels its time running out. A second gentle breath. The air tastes like rain without clouds. The light widens and folds, and within its folds are memories you thought were lost. The little boy's letter he never sent. The way his father's eyes softened when Avi fixed that old radio. The day he promised to forgive and forgot to keep the promise. Nothing is thrown away, nothing exploited. Here, the past is healed by being seen without accusation. The relief is almost physical. You feel it at the back of your neck. The way tight muscles let go when someone trustworthy says enough now. Avi's heart answers in a language he never learned. He does not ask for proof. He does not demand a sign. The sign stands before him. Recognition dawns with the patience of God. Yeshua, not only the rabbi, not only the miracle worker, but the root from which mercy grows. The title he never used in prayer does not feel like a leap. It feels like coming home by a road he did not know was his. And coming home is the truest science in the universe, where hypothesis meets fulfillment and calls the result love. In the radiance, Avi understands that love needs a vessel, water needs a basin, flame needs a wick, music needs an ear. If a heart is clear, love passes through it like light through living water. If a heart is clouded, love bends, breaks, and dims. This, then, is holiness, not a posture of superiority, but the clearness that lets love travel unbroken. He did not think holiness could be beautiful. Now he sees beauty is simply holiness at work. He wants to remain, to memorize every contour of this face he cannot quite outline, to live forever inside these eyes that do not tire of him. You feel the ache rise with him, that delicious ache of belonging. The presence does not recede. It waits, as if offering the next scene in a sequence already written for his good. Avi steadies himself with a third gentle form, a soft inner nod, ready to be shown what he could never have discovered with nets and meters and samples. The meeting is complete, yet not finished. Awe has done its work. Now comes understanding, and with understanding, purpose. The light does not blind, it tutors. It will teach him the language of water all over again, but this time from the heart outward. He is no longer a man afloat on his life. He is a soul held by the one who governs it. The vision widened, as though the light itself had hands and peeled away the veil of what Avi thought was real. Suddenly, he was no longer in that place of brilliance alone. He was hovering above the Sea of Galilee again, but it was not the same lake he had spent 30 years sampling, charting, dissecting with data. This was the lake in perfection. The water stretched like crystal glass, clarity so complete that every pebble on the lakebed glowed in its rightful place. Fish shimmered like threads of living silver, weaving through plants that pulsed with gentle radiance. The entire body of water breathed as though it were alive, not merely oxygen and biology, but holiness itself radiating from every drop. Avi's scientist mind strained to measure it, but his soul knew better. This was the sea as it was meant to be before decay, before bitterness, before sin's stain. Jesus stood beside him, not speaking first, only letting Avi take it in. The scientist in him was undone. He had lived for purity of water samples, chasing the ideal conditions, but this surpassed everything. No lab could reproduce it. No formula could describe it. This was not the clarity of chemistry. It was the clarity of God's intention. At last, the voice entered him again, gentle, thunderous, undeniable. He was told, "This is how the heart of my people is meant to be, full of love, worship, and forgiveness." The words wrapped Avi like warm air, and he felt them settle not just in his thoughts, but in his bones. He began to understand. The lake was a mirror of the human heart. When pure, it reflected light perfectly, transmitting love without distortion. Memories tumbled into him. Leah's quiet prayers by candlelight, the sound of Maya's laughter as a child, the evenings when he was too tired to join them. He realized those were moments when purity was offered but often ignored. It was not his family that lacked. It was his heart that had been clouded. Standing above that perfect Galilee, he felt both convicted and invited, not shamed, but called. And with that call came knowledge, tidbit of truth as clear as the water beneath him. Physical clarity can be measured, but spiritual clarity must be lived. Just as sediment clouds the lake and starves its life, unforgiveness clouds the heart and starves the soul. Avi had studied the chemistry of oxygen depletion, how fish suffocated when algae choked the water. Now he saw the parallel. Bitterness, pride, judgment, they choked life in people just as surely as pollution killed fish. The beauty was overwhelming. Tears that did not belong to a body streamed through his soul. He longed to dive into that perfect water, to immerse himself in its living glow. He reached inwardly toward Jesus, aching with gratitude for being shown what no textbook could reveal. He understood now. The Sea of Galilee was not just his office. It was a parable waiting to be read, a map of the human heart, designed to be clear, alive, and holy. The moment lingered like music on the last note of a song, stretching into silence but still echoing. And Avi, who had built his life on data, was ready for the lesson that would undo him. The lake was pure now, but Jesus was about to show him what happens when the heart refuses love, refuses forgiveness, refuses him. The perfect shimmer of the lake began to shift. What had been crystal clear, pulsing with holy life, suddenly trembled under a shadow. Avi leaned closer, his soul alert. From above, he saw it. A single dark drop falling into the water. It was thick, black like oil, but heavier, unnatural. It touched the surface and did not dissolve. It hung there like a wound in the purity. Another drop fell, then another. Each one seemed to echo with a vibration of sorrow. Avi's mind, trained to connect cause and effect, wanted to know the source. He turned toward Jesus, but the answer came not in words at first, but in visions. He saw a family seated at a table. Their faces were hard, the father's voice sharp as he tore down his son with words that left invisible scars. The mother's silence was a wall of bitterness, her eyes closed to kindness. The boy stared at his plate, anger simmering beneath the surface. As they sat in this silent war, another drop of blackness fell into the lake. The scene shifted. A woman on the phone whispered about another, her voice laced with judgment, feeding gossip like fire. A drop, this one darker, nearly red, fell into the water. Then Avi saw a man in a place of worship. His lips prayed with eloquence, his hands raised high. But Jesus allowed Avi to feel what lived in his heart. Resentment, cold and deep, toward a neighbor who had wronged him years ago. The man's prayer was hollow, painted with pride. A thick, reddish sludge slid from him into the water below. Each act, small, common, human, was a poison poured into what was meant to be life. Avi's heart broke as he watched. These were not criminals or tyrants. These were ordinary people, families, neighbors, worshippers. And yet, every unkind word, every bitter silence, every unhealed grudge added to the corruption. Jesus spoke then, his voice carrying the weight of grief. This is unforgiveness. This is judgment. This is pride. Each drop may seem small, but together they stain the whole. Avi looked back to the water. Where moments ago light had shimmered from the depths, now shadows spread. The perfect fish, once glowing with life, swam through patches of darkness. Their scales dulled, their gills slowed. Plants that had swayed with vitality began to droop. It was as if death itself had been injected into the veins of creation. The scientist in Avi remembered lectures on toxins, how even a trace amount could alter the balance of an ecosystem. But this was beyond biology. This was a mirror for humanity. He understood in an instant. Unforgiveness was not private. It was communal. Each drop from one person's heart spread outward, corrupting the whole. Emotion rose like a tide within him. He thought of his own life. Words he had spoken without care, pride he had clung to, moments when he had chosen silence instead of reconciliation. How many drops had he spilled into the sea? How many lives had been poisoned by his refusal to forgive? The vision would not let him look away. One more family appeared, one more quarrel, one more drop. The surface of the lake rippled with dark wounds, each one growing, spreading, pressing against the beauty until the clarity he had first seen was almost gone. Avi fell silent. He felt grief heavier than death. He realized the poison was not an accident. It was a choice. Every time a heart preferred bitterness over forgiveness, pride over humility, judgment over love. And with each choice, the sea grew darker. Jesus' presence pressed close, not condemning, but grieving. And Avi knew. He was being shown the sickness that had spread not only through strangers, but through his people, through himself, through the world. The perfect Sea of Galilee had become a fragile mirror, revealing how far the heart of humanity had drifted from the purity it was meant to hold. The dark drops multiplied until Avi could no longer count them. What began as stains became streams. What began as streams became a flood. The entire lake that once shimmered like living glass now thickened into a murky red. It was not the vibrant red of blood carrying life. It was the dull, sickly red of infection spreading through flesh. The Sea of Galilee, his beloved lake, looked wounded, poisoned beyond repair. He hovered above in horror. The fish that had once pulsed with light floated belly up, lifeless, their scales losing color. The plants bent low, gray and brittle. The holy glow was gone. What had been a mirror of purity was now a mirror of decay. Avi trembled, realizing he was not just seeing a lake. He was being shown the state of human hearts. Jesus' voice came, tender yet sorrowful, echoing like waves through his soul. This is what unforgiveness does. This is what bitterness breeds. My people choke on their pride and drink the poison they create. They pray with their lips while holding stones in their hearts. Avi felt the grief as if it were his own. He thought of the countless times he had ignored Leah's quiet words when she urged him to forgive someone who had wronged him. He thought of the sharp way he had judged colleagues, the bitterness he carried toward those who dismissed his work. Drops, all part of this Red Sea. The vision pulled back, widening beyond Galilee. Avi saw faces of people across nations, across cultures, families divided by silence, communities ripped apart by politics, religious leaders consumed by pride, nations locked in hatred. Every quarrel, every act of gossip, every refusal to forgive, each one adding to the crimson tide. His heart ached with unbearable weight. This was not just Israel. This was the world. The Red Sea was not confined to Galilee's waters. It was flowing through humanity's veins. It was spiritual pollution, invisible but deadly, suffocating the breath of love. And then came the tidbit of truth, spoken not as lecture but as revelation. Unforgiveness is the epidemic of the soul. It is more deadly than plague, more destructive than war, because it begins quietly in the heart and spreads without resistance. It poisons marriages, families, friendships, nations, and the tragedy is that most never see it until it is too late. Avi wept without tears. He cried out silently, his soul groaning. Is there no hope? Is the sea beyond saving? Is humanity doomed to drown in its own bitterness? The silence that followed was heavy, but within it he felt Jesus' gaze, steady and unyielding. Even in grief, those eyes carried love. And though Avi saw no answer yet, he sensed one was coming. The Red Sea was not the end of the vision. It was the warning before the cure. Still, the sorrow of that moment branded itself into his spirit. He would never again look at the Sea of Galilee, or the human heart, the same way. He had seen the poison. He had seen the truth. And he knew the world was sick with it. Just when Avi thought the vision would leave him drowning in despair, something shifted. The heavy red waters quivered, as if waiting for a different voice to speak. Then, from the darkness, a single drop fell, not black, not red, but golden, liquid light. It landed upon the poisoned sea, and instead of sinking, it spread in ripples of brilliance. For a brief circle around it, the water turned clear again. Avi leaned closer, desperate to understand. Jesus turned his gaze toward him and gently opened a new vision. A young woman sat in her car, hands trembling, eyes wet with tears. Her phone glowed in the darkness as she typed. Her father had wounded her with years of cruel words. Every part of her wanted to cling to the anger. It felt justified, safe, even righteous. But her lips whispered a fragile prayer. God help me forgive. Her fingers moved, shaky but determined. Dad, what you said hurt me, but I choose to forgive you. I love you. She hit send, and Avi saw the golden drop fall from her heart into the lake. The ripple spread, pushing back the suffocating red, restoring clarity in a small circle. A dying fish swam into that zone of light, and its gills began to move again. It lived. Another scene unfolded, a man in a nursing home, sitting beside his elderly mother. She hardly recognized him, her mind clouded by age, yet he held her hand with patience, speaking words of kindness without expecting anything in return. A golden drop fell. Another ripple spread. Then Avi saw strangers of different backgrounds, people who could have chosen suspicion or hatred, but instead they chose to listen, to serve, to show mercy instead of judgment. With each act, another golden drop fell into the poisoned waters. Slowly, circles of light grew and touched each other, connecting like a network of healing veins. Hope surged through Avi's soul. The golden drops were simple acts. Forgiveness whispered through tears, kindness offered without expectation, humility embraced when pride was easier. Yet they were strong enough to push back the infection of bitterness. Jesus' voice carried the revelation. This is the cure. It is not complicated. It is not hidden. It is forgiveness. It is humble love. It is choosing to see my face in the person you want to hate the most. The words pierced Avi like fire and balm at once. He thought of the arguments he had clung to, the bitterness he had nursed. He realized every time he refused to forgive, he had contributed to the Red Sea. And every time he could have chosen love, he had withheld a golden drop. Emotion filled him, not sorrow this time, but a hope so radiant it burned away despair. The Red Sea was not final. It could be cleared, one golden drop at a time. Humanity was not beyond saving, but the choice belonged to each heart. The lake beneath him shimmered now with both realities, wide stretches of poison, yet pockets of healing. And in that fragile tension, Avi understood. The fate of the sea depended on the choices of people, moment by moment, act by act. The golden drops of forgiveness were small, but they were stronger than the ocean of bitterness. The beauty of those golden ripples filled Avi with longing. He wanted to stay in that vision, to watch the poisoned waters turn pure drop by drop until the entire sea shimmered with life again. His soul clung to the light, aching to remain in the presence of the one who revealed it. He turned toward Jesus, his heart breaking open. Please, let me stay, he whispered inside himself. The request was not made with words, but with every fiber of his being. He was tired of the world of pride and arguments, of data and debates. Here, there was only peace. Here, there was only truth. Jesus looked at him with eyes that were deeper than oceans. They held both sorrow and infinite love. His voice entered Avi's soul like a current. Your research is not finished. You have a new sample to deliver. Go back and tell them what you saw. The word struck Avi harder than any lightning bolt. To return? To leave this place? To leave these eyes? It felt like being asked to step out of heaven itself and back into dust. A cry rose in him, sharp with agony. He pleaded silently, gripping the edges of the light as though it might hold him in place. Please don't send me back. I cannot bear to lose this. But Jesus reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch was unlike anything Abby had ever known. It was peace poured into the marrow of his spirit, a reassurance that even if he returned to the broken world, he would never be alone. The warmth from that hand carried strength, as if heaven itself had lent him its courage. Then came the mission, spoken slowly so that every word pierced deep. Tell them about the Red Sea in their hearts. Tell them I am grieving for them. And tell them I have given them the cure, the golden drops of love that can still make the sea clean again. Abby trembled. The assignment was more than information. It was a call to become a witness. He was not only to describe what he saw, he was to embody it, to live it, to deliver the message like a prophet carrying water to a thirsty land. His soul wrestled. On one side, the unbearable ache of leaving the presence of Jesus. On the other, the undeniable pull of duty, the awareness that his wife still needed him, that his daughter still called him father, that the world itself needed this warning. He realized his life's research on water had been only a shadow pointing to this greater truth. His true work was just beginning. He bowed inwardly, surrendering though every part of him resisted. The choice to return was agony, but beneath the agony was obedience. He whispered the only words he had left, not my will, but yours. Jesus' sad smile deepened, as if he understood the weight of that surrender. His eyes promised what his hand had already given. I will be with you. Always. The light trembled, and Avi felt the first threads of departure pulling at him. He clung to the memory of those eyes, burning them into his soul. If he could not stay, he would carry them within him. He would carry the message, the mission, the cure. He braced himself. The embrace of heaven was loosening, and the world of noise and pain waited on the other side. The parting tears like silk torn in a quiet room. You don't hear the rip so much as feel it. First comes the absence, a soft sinking, and then the violence. Fire explodes in Avi's chest. The clean hush of heaven collapses into the heavy air of the boat. Sound returns like 1,000 doors slamming, men shouting, water licking the hull, a radio crackling, a rotor thudding the sky into pieces. You flinch with him. His ribs feel made of glass and lightning. He gulps at the world as if the world were too thick to breathe. Hands descend, calloused, mortal, frantic. A palm slaps his cheek, another steadies his jaw. There's a cold circle on his sternum, another on his flank, gel and metal and urgency. A voice barks numbers that mean nothing to a soul that just learned the alphabet of love. The paddles lift. A smell of ozone bites the air. Then the jolt. Pure electricity knits body to body again. He arches, gasps, collapses. Somewhere a stranger cries, pulse. Somewhere another says, stay with me, brother. You feel the boat pitch. You feel the men become a single organism of rescue. The sun is ablade. The blue above is too loud. The lake, his lake, throws shards of light into his eyes. He wants to lift a hand to block it, but his hand is a stone wearing skin. He tries to form a word. Only one word. But the word dissolves on a tongue that forgot the shape of speech. His whole body rings like a bell just struck. Pain is sound. Sound is pain. And yet, buried beneath the clangor, there is still the faint warmth on his shoulder where a hand had rested. You notice it with him. It steadies the nausea of returning. Fabric rips. Tape tears from a roll. A cuff bites his arm and squeezes the truth from his arteries. Pressure is climbing. Sinus rhythm. Load and go. The sentences eddy around him, a little river of purpose. A mask lowers to his face. He tastes plastic and breathing, and this new life he didn't ask for, but was given back. The fishermen stand aside, blessing him with eyes that say we saw you leave. He wants to say the water is more than water. Another jolt of pain answers for him. The helicopter's belly opens like a second sky. He rises on straps and hands, and the grunts of men who refuse to surrender someone they do not know. Wind slaps. A strap bites his collarbone. The world shrinks to a whirring room that floats. A medic leans close, pupils steady as instruments, voice set to a rhythm meant to calm. Avi, you're all right. You're with us. He is not all right, and he is more than all right. He closes his eyes to silence the world and sees light behind the lids. A small, gentle breath, you take one with him. Hospital corridors eat distance. Clicks, beeps, sliding doors, everything engineered to outpace death. A colleague's face appears in a window of fluorescent time. Shock registers under professionalism. Charts rattle. Words like a storm. Hypoxia, no fibrillation, downtime. The colleague reads numbers, then looks at Avi's eyes and sees a story numbers cannot hold. He signs things anyway, because bodies want protocols and souls want mercy, and in this building both must be served. Later, quiet. Machines make their moon sounds. Leah's silhouette steadies itself in the doorway, then dissolves into tears against his hand. He feels them as warm proof that he is back on the map, where she can touch him. Her prayers arrive like birds alighting on a branch, weightless and real. Maya's face fills a small screen. Too many pixels, too much love for the frame. Her voice breaks in the middle of Abba. He tries to smile, and makes a trembling half-moon that convinces them. You lean closer. The room feels small enough to cradle. Doctors convene as if around a paradox they cannot file. Words return now, fewer and slower, soft stones he can stack. 23 minutes. Asystole. No neurological deficit. They present the data like priests bearing offerings they don't believe will be accepted. Instruments say he shouldn't be here. Exams say he should be less here than he is. But here he is, remembering a lake made of light, remembering eyes that did not accuse. The main emotion in the room is wonder, wrapped in caution, tied with gratitude. Even the skeptic in his chest, the one who once audited every miracle, falls quiet out of respect. Abby sleeps, and the sleep is busy. Not dreams, not delirium, adjustment. The spirit is teaching the body how to carry news it cannot articulate yet. He wakes to Leah's thumb drawing small circles on his wrist, a gentle form that revises the ache. You feel it, the slow patching of fear, stitch by tender stitch. He whispers hoarse fragments to her, not the whole vision, just the edges. Water like glass, love like home, a hand on his shoulder. She understands more than the words. She has always understood more than the words. A chaplain visits, then a nurse from Nazareth who says, too casually to be coincidence, that her grandfather once mended nets on that lake. A janitor hums a hymn while emptying a bin, the melody thin as a thread but strong enough to tug memory. The world keeps sending witnesses disguised as ordinary people. Abby starts to see how often heaven hides in plain clothes. He smiles, and it doesn't hurt as much this time. The tidbit arrives the next morning like a lab note pinned to the day. Clinical literature is thick with cases that break the map, return after prolonged cardiac arrest, intact cognition beyond documented hypoxia. The brain is a mystery that refuses to be fully graphed. Science, honest and humble, knows its edges. Abby had taught graduate students that a model is only as good as the questions it cannot yet answer. He keeps his covenant with truth and lets this one stand. There are events the instruments record without understanding. What happened to him can be logged. It cannot be contained. This is not an insult to science. It is an invitation to awe. He asks to see the fishermen. They come, caps in hands, eyes surprised to find the dead man practicing gratitude. He thanks them by name because someone told him, and because names matter now more than ever. He tells them, carefully, simply, that the lake is more than a place, that forgiveness moves like water and cleans what poison makes. He doesn't preach. He offers a cup. One of them nods, eyes puddling, and says his daughter hasn't spoken to him in months. Another stares at the floor as if reading instructions written in tile. You hear the small hinge creak. A door opens in a heart you do not see. Afternoon leans through the blinds, laying thin ladders of light across the blanket. He climbs them with his eyes, one rung, then another, practicing the ascent from fear to peace. A second gentle form. He places his palm over his heart and rests it there, a small pledge to the mission he did not choose. The pain is less sharp. The monitors approve with small green blessings. That night, he finally tells Leah and Maya everything, beginning not where he left, but where he arrived, at the eyes that knew him and did not turn away. He speaks of the lake as it should be, the black drops that are really choices, the Red Sea that is really us, and the golden cure that falls one act at a time. He expects protest or worry that he is fragile. Instead, he receives the kind of silence that says we believe you because love has trained us to recognize truth. Tears come, not dramatic, just honest. A third gentle form. Fingers interlaced on the sheet, 3 lives braided again. When sleep takes him, it is friendlier. He wakes before dawn to a stillness that does not require heaven's full radiance to be holy. Breath in, breath out. The room smells of antiseptic and orange peel from a snack Leah couldn't finish. Somewhere a cart squeaks. Somewhere a nurse laughs. The world has seams and noises and interruptions. It also has assignments. He remembers the hand on his shoulder and the words that sent him back like an arrow. Tell them. Morning rounds declare what the night already knew. He is improving. Discharge will come soon. The lake waits. The synagogue waits. The classroom, the market, the dinner table, every place with a heart inside it waits. He turns his face to the window and lets the light find him, not as an assault now, but as a pledge. He is still in a bed, yes, but he has already begun walking. The miracle is not that he returned. It is that he returned with a map. The days after his return unfolded like chapters written in two worlds at once. Avi walked through hospital corridors and family embraces, yet beneath every step flowed the memory of light. Each heartbeat felt borrowed, each breath a reminder of those 23 minutes when his soul had crossed the veil. He knew his life could no longer belong to research alone. The water he had measured all his life had become a mirror for hearts, and he was now its witness. At first, he shared carefully. With Leah, his words came out in pieces, like fragile vessels carrying something too heavy to hold. She listened with eyes wet, not with doubt, but with recognition. She had always prayed that he would meet the one she carried in her heart. Now, he had met him face to face. Maya wept openly on the video call, her tears flowing into joy. For them, his survival was miracle enough. For him, survival was assignment. When colleagues asked, he spoke with restraint. He described the clinical miracle, the unexplainable preservation of his brain. But then he leaned in, lowering his voice, telling them the deeper truth, that unforgiveness is killing us more surely than any disease. Some raised eyebrows, others fell into silence. One doctor whispered later that he had not spoken to his brother in 10 years. A seed was planted. Avi began speaking beyond the hospital, in small gatherings, then in larger ones. His words were not polished sermons. They were testimony wrapped in the cadence of a man who had measured oxygen levels and now measured eternity. He described the perfect lake, the black drops of bitterness, the red sea of judgment, and the golden cure of forgiveness. He warned that the epidemic was not outside us, but within us. He called people to look into their own hearts and ask, "What is the color of your water?" Some wept, some resisted, some walked away, but others began to reconcile, to forgive debts, to call estranged family, to lower walls built on pride. He heard stories trickle back, small golden drops in the sea of humanity. Each one gave him courage to keep telling the story. The scientist had become a witness. The skeptic had become a messenger. And in every telling, he felt again the hand on his shoulder, the voice reminding him, "I will be with you." Avi knew his time on earth would not be forever, but the mission would outlive him, carried by every person who chose to forgive, every soul who chose to love. The Sea of Galilee was no longer just his field of study. It had become a prophecy, a mirror of the world's heart, and he had been chosen to deliver its warning and its hope. His life after death was no longer about measuring water. It was about delivering the cure that only heaven could give, one golden drop at a time. Slow now, softer. The story is not just his, it leans toward you. You feel the echo of that hand on the shoulder, the warmth that steadies trembling. Heaven is not far. It is near, waiting to be revealed in the smallest act of mercy, in the quietest choice to forgive. The sea you carry inside your chest may shimmer clear or ripple red, but it is never beyond hope. Listen, bitterness is heavy, and it poisons silently. It eats away at joy, at family bonds, at faith itself. You may not see it, but the ripples are there. Yet one drop of forgiveness, one drop of love, one drop of humility can send light across the whole surface of your soul. That is the cure Avi carried back, the message Jesus entrusted to him. And now, to you. Do not wait for a deathbed or a miracle to teach you what the Spirit already whispers. Let go. Forgive. Choose love when hate feels justified. Choose humility when pride feels safer. Choose mercy when judgment seems easier. Each choice is a golden drop. Each golden drop clears the waters, not only in your life, but in the lives around you. So pause now. Breathe. Look into your own heart. What is the color of your water? If you find any trace of red, you know what to do. Heaven is watching, waiting, ready to fill your ripple with light. If these words resonate with you, please leave an amen in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with at least 3 friends or family members right now. Now is your time to make a difference. Spreading this message is not only an act of love, but also a mission that Jesus himself has entrusted to you.